Hey. Strap in, because today's story is going to take you on a wild ride straight from my corner of the world. There's nothing quite like pledging your life to someone, signing those joint bank accounts, and believing that love is forever, until reality punches you right in the gut. This one? Yeah, it hurts. I realized my wife was unfaithful in the worst possible way. She gave me an STD. That revelation led to a divorce, and let's just say I made sure one of her most treasured possessions disappeared along the way. I've been lurking here for years, reading stories from other men about wives who cheated and the creative ways they were held accountable. It's not just entertainment. I've learned a lot about the signs of infidelity, how women hide their affairs, and the subtle ways to uncover the truth. I'd been married for 11 years. I had just hit 40, and my wife was 38. I trusted her, or at least, I thought I did. But the deeper I delved into those stories, the more I realized that you can never truly know what's going on with someone else. Not at work, not on their phone, not even at home. What made my discovery of Jolene's cheating even worse was how I found out. This wasn't the typical scenario, catching someone in the act. No, it was something far more insidious. Maybe walking in on her would have been less painful, but I'll argue otherwise, because I lived through this. Life had been smooth for us. Nothing to complain about. 2 kids, just the number we wanted, behaving wonderfully. Everything seemed perfect, and honestly, I thought we were on track for a 50-year anniversary. Then the first sting hit, literally. I felt a burning sensation when I peed. My initial thought, an STD. But, being cautious, I convinced myself it could be a simple UTI. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. Jumping to conclusions about infidelity can ruin everything if you're wrong. I mentioned my suspicion casually, and she didn't freak out. She agreed it might be a UTI and suggested I get antibiotics. Her calm response initially eased my mind. But it didn't last. The moment I noticed discharge, I knew something was seriously wrong. I rushed to the clinic, got tested, and waited nervously for the results. During those few days, Jolene noticed I was acting differently. It was difficult to mask my suspicion and anger, but I held it together until confirmation. The diagnosis hit me like a freight train: gonorrhea. I hadn't been with anyone else. Over 15 years had passed since anything like that, and there was only one explanation. I picked up the prescription immediately. Anger surged through me like nothing I'd ever experienced before. Confronting her while the kids were around was out of the question. So, I waited until the weekend, sent the kids to my brother's, and then it was just the 2 of us. I calmly told her I had gone to the clinic. She asked about medicine for a UTI, but I corrected her. This wasn't a UTI. This was gonorrhea. And there was only one way I could have contracted it, from her. Her reaction? Denial. She insisted she had no symptoms, so it couldn't have been her. The way she said it was infuriating. It sounded like she was implying I had been the cheater. I made it clear I wasn't naive. I knew she could be asymptomatic but still infectious. Her repeated denials only fueled my anger. Then came the gaslighting. She questioned my nights at work, my overtime, implying that I could have been unfaithful. That angered me to the core. I shouted, calling her out for trying to manipulate me, demanding she stop lying before I lost control entirely. She kept insisting she was innocent, shaking her head, forcing me to ask her one more time, "Did you cheat and give me a disease?" And she said it again. In a moment of controlled rage, I lunged for her phone, and she panicked, clawing at it and screaming. That panic told me everything. I was right. I scrolled through her messages, keeping an eye on her, and there it was, a conversation with a man named Rob. They had discussed who was clean, with him admitting he'd had gonorrhea but already treated it. She had tried to cover it up, pretending it was a UTI when she knew the truth. Her anger at him in the messages confirmed she knew what she was doing. Scrolling further, I noticed deletions, a trail she tried to cover, but she hadn't anticipated me confronting her. I screenshot the messages before tossing the phone back at her, and I demanded to know why I wasn't enough. Her answer? Weak. She said she was bored, made a bad decision, and didn't have the courage to stop. No remorse, no apology. Just a matter-of-fact confession of selfishness. After 11 years and 2 children, she had chosen to lie and cheat. I told her that there was no way to fix this. Cheating was unforgivable, and I wasn't interested in negotiation. She tried to play the victim, reminding me of 11 years of marriage, but I had already thought it all through. She had given me an STD, continued her affair, and had no intention of confessing voluntarily. The weekend passed, and I stayed in a hotel, avoiding any chance of confrontation. I returned only for the kids, 7 and 9, to prevent confusion or fear. Barely speaking to her, I began planning the next steps, divorce, and making sure she regretted her choices. Don't marry if fidelity isn't guaranteed, because the fallout can be catastrophic. Once the divorce process began, I didn't waste a single second. I contacted a lawyer immediately and set things in motion. She received the papers while at work. I made sure to avoid any dramatic scenes while we were still under the same roof. I didn't need unnecessary conflict, and for a brief moment, it felt satisfying to know that things were now moving forward on my terms. Her initial reaction was a mix of disbelief and silent anger. She probably assumed that sharing a house meant I might reconsider working things out, but I had already made up my mind. There was no chance of reconciliation. She stayed quiet, claiming she would review the documents and sign them. I felt a small sense of relief, less room for her to try dragging things out or complicating matters. But I also knew this was only the beginning. The hardest part was yet to come, telling the kids. It wasn't simple. Both my 7- and 9-year-old needed to understand that our family was changing, that Mom and Dad would be living separately. Explaining such a betrayal in a way they could comprehend without causing trauma was nearly impossible. Tears came. Lots of them. My heart broke alongside theirs. But as gut-wrenching as it was, I knew that showing them a functional facade while we hated each other daily would be far worse. Living arrangements were tricky. I spent nights in the guest room, careful not to provoke any tension. When the divorce became official, decisions about the house, custody, and logistics loomed large. Sleeping elsewhere temporarily was strategic. It preserved my claim to the house. Even with all the upheaval, I felt a strange clarity, no regrets, no self-blame. I had been faithful, while she had chosen betrayal. Her infidelity and the STD were not my fault, and it became increasingly clear that she would face the consequences of her own actions. The divorce didn't completely favor me. The judge ruled that cheating wasn't a criminal offense, even with the STD involved, so it had no impact on property division. I fought for 50-50 custody, not out of resentment, but because the kids deserved both of us. Despite her request for full custody, which left me stunned, the court awarded equitable shared custody. That moment shifted something in me. I realized trying to be nice, trying to act as though her betrayal didn't matter, was pointless. It wouldn't change outcomes. It wouldn't change her, and it wouldn't erase the damage she'd caused. After the divorce, she walked away with the house, child support, and alimony. She earns less than me, but the numbers still felt excessive, considering the years of betrayal. I didn't blame my lawyer, the judge clearly favored her. Still, I felt a fire ignite within me. Revenge wasn't about property or money, it was about something deeply personal, something that would hurt her in a way she deserved. And I knew exactly what it would be. You see, Yolin had once worked as a florist. Even though she no longer did professionally, she adored plants. Shortly after we married, she received a bonsai tree, a project she'd nurtured for over a decade. It wasn't just a plant, it was her pride, her accomplishment, her little emblem of patience and care. And I decided to remove it from her life, to remind her that actions have consequences. Some might call it petty or extreme. Maybe it was. But after 11 years of marriage and the betrayal she inflicted, I wasn't going to feel guilty. I had a spare key to the house, and during the day, while the kids were at school and she was at work, I went in. I took only the bonsai tree, nothing else. No violence, no unnecessary drama, just her cherished symbol of stability. I gave it to a friend who loves plants. I can't guarantee it'll be cared for the same way, but that wasn't my concern. I made sure she knew exactly where it had gone, enough to plant a seed of worry and reflection in her mind. A week later, she confronted me about its disappearance. I feigned ignorance, knowing she suspected the truth. The bonsai had vanished, and she was upset, though not hysterical. She knew it was meaningful, but I had kept everything subtle enough that no one could accuse me of aggression or theft. She pressed harder, insisting the tree couldn't have disappeared on its own. She implied I was the only person capable of removing it, given my awareness of its significance. I confirmed this silently with my demeanor, no words needed. I suggested she check the house and even asked her to include the kids. Days passed. Then, the call came. Tears, apologies, frantic regret. She admitted defeat, saying, "You win." And just like that, she didn't bring it up again. The bonsai's disappearance left an impression, an enduring reminder of her choices and the consequences she'd set into motion. She reached out randomly afterward, expressing sorrow for cheating and acknowledging her selfishness. She never requested the tree back, but I knew it had done its job. There's a part of me that contemplates giving it back in a year or two if she's shown true growth, but the desire to maintain my strength outweighs that. She deserves the lesson and the pain. I have no obligations to play the good guy anymore. Ultimately, she has no claim over me or my life, and that's what matters. The irony? She believed she could cheat, give me an STD, gaslight me, and walk away unscathed. That tree represented years of dedication and care, a tangible symbol of her life's work. And yet, after betraying me and risking my health, the only cost she paid was a bonsai. It's poetic in a dark, satisfying way. If someone you trusted so deeply not only cheated but also endangered you, how would you react? That's a question I ask anyone listening. Looking back, I realize the experience left me with a hard-earned clarity. Every decision, every moment of anger, every calculated move served a purpose. The bonsai wasn't just a plant, it was a symbol of consequence, a quiet retribution that reminded her that actions have weight. While some might call it vindictive, I saw it as reclaiming a sense of control in a life that had been blindsided by betrayal. Even though the divorce process had its challenges, it was a relief to see it through. Dealing with the stress, the emotional turbulence, and the occasional despair taught me something vital. You cannot control the choices of others, but you can control your response. I had been faithful, responsible, and patient through 11 years of marriage. She, on the other hand, chose deception and recklessness. That clarity, that truth, became my foundation. In the weeks after, life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. The kids were adjusting. The conversations about their family dynamic were painful, but necessary. 7- and 9-year-olds don't grasp the full spectrum of adult betrayal, but they understood the basic truth. Mommy and Daddy were no longer living together, and our love for them hadn't changed. I stayed involved, attentive, and patient, even as my own emotions swung between anger and relief. Reflecting on my experiences, I realized something fundamental. People often underestimate the quiet power of consequence. The bonsai tree, my carefully measured retaliation, had provided a tangible outcome without overstepping into danger or unlawful territory. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was a calculated act, a clear signal that betrayal has a cost. It reminded her that some mistakes aren't easily forgotten, and some losses linger far longer than apologies ever could. There were moments of self-doubt, yes. Sometimes I wondered if I had gone too far or if my actions would leave a permanent scar. But then I remembered the repeated lies, the denial, the gaslighting, all of it. This wasn't about cruelty, it was about balance, a way to assert that betrayal has consequences, that cheating isn't inconsequential. Interestingly, she seemed to grasp that reality, though reluctantly. Her random calls, filled with remorse, reflected her acknowledgement that she had misstepped. She didn't ask for restitution, and she didn't attempt to manipulate the situation further. She had learned, in her own painful way, that some decisions can't simply be erased. That bonsai, in a quiet, symbolic way, had cemented a lesson she couldn't ignore. At the same time, I kept moving forward. Work, parenting, life, everything demanded attention. I didn't allow bitterness to dominate my existence. While the emotional toll was significant, I knew my children needed stability and my presence, not my despair. That realization kept me grounded. It reminded me that while betrayal can wound deeply, resilience and proactive choices define how you navigate the aftermath. I also reflected on trust and the fragile nature of intimacy. 11 years of marriage had been built on mutual understanding, shared experiences, and hope for the future. Yet a single series of poor choices had shattered that foundation. The betrayal wasn't just about the STD or the affair, it was about the fundamental breach of trust. Recognizing that helped me compartmentalize my anger, focus on the practical next steps, and protect myself from unnecessary pain. Through the divorce, co-parenting, and aftermath, I realized an essential truth: accountability matters more than punishment. My actions with the bonsai tree weren't about vengeance alone, they were about accountability and recognition. Actions have consequences, and sometimes the lessons must be tangible to leave an impact. That's what separated simple anger from meaningful response. Even today, months later, there are reminders of what happened. Simple triggers, like passing by a florist or seeing a bonsai in a store, spark memories. They serve as a reminder of how fragile trust can be and how important it is to protect oneself from repeated harm. Those small, recurring reminders are a testament to resilience. They're a signal that even after pain, life continues, lessons are learned, and boundaries are set. The story also left me with clarity about the kind of life I want going forward. Fidelity, honesty, and mutual respect aren't optional, they are fundamental. I've seen the damage caused when these principles are ignored. Moving forward, I intend to choose partners and friendships with care and to recognize early warning signs before trusting blindly. Experience has taught me that no amount of hope or love can compensate for deceit. As I reflect, I also recognize the dark silver lining. Every time I recall the ordeal, the sting of betrayal, or even the literal reminder of discomfort from that STD, it reinforces the reality. I dodged a lifetime with someone who treated boredom as justification for destruction. That perspective, harsh as it may sound, is freeing. It allows me to move forward without resentment dictating my life. It allows me to teach my children about the value of integrity, honesty, and self-respect. The bonsai tree, small yet significant, remains a symbol in my mind of justice served in a subtle but impactful way. It reminds me that even in the face of deep personal violation, measured responses can reclaim agency and provide closure. She lost more than a plant, she lost control, trust, and the comfort of taking liberties without consequence. It's a lesson that sticks, and one I hope resonates with anyone facing similar betrayals. Through it all, I maintained focus on what truly mattered: my health, my children, and my future. I refused to let her actions define my life. Cheating, deceit, and betrayal are heavy burdens, but resilience, clarity, and measured action are stronger. I learned that revenge doesn't have to be dramatic or destructive. It can be precise, symbolic, and powerful, leaving a lasting lesson without collateral damage. I also learned that emotional intelligence is key. Staying calm during confrontations, documenting evidence, and strategically planning next steps allowed me to navigate a painful situation without causing harm to those who didn't deserve it. The children remained protected, the legal system was respected, and my own moral compass remained intact, even while delivering a lesson she couldn't ignore. Ultimately, the experience reaffirmed a critical truth: love requires trust, respect, and mutual care. When those pillars are shattered, there is no shame in walking away. Sometimes the strongest statements come not from anger alone, but from measured, deliberate action that demonstrates consequences clearly and effectively. My life, my children, and my future deserved nothing less. Eventually, the dust settled. Life after betrayal wasn't easy, but it was real. I had rebuilt routines, maintained consistency for the kids, and focused on clarity over chaos. While some days carried reminders of the past, the lessons embedded themselves like unshakable truths. Trust is precious, actions have consequences, and resilience is everything. The bonsai tree became a quiet emblem of accountability. She knew it had vanished because of her actions. That subtle reminder, small yet piercing, carried far more weight than words ever could. The mere thought of it brought a bittersweet satisfaction, one that didn't require me to stoop into malice or aggression beyond that calculated, symbolic act. It was enough to see her confronted with the consequences of selfishness. Our children, 7 and 9, gradually adjusted. Conversations were honest, age-appropriate, and focused on love, stability, and understanding. I made it clear that while Mommy and Daddy were living separately, we both loved them equally. Protecting them from the emotional wreckage of adult mistakes was paramount. Their resilience and adaptability reminded me that even in the midst of betrayal, life continues. And, as much as I hated to admit it, they were teaching me lessons too, about forgiveness, growth, and moving forward without bitterness. With the divorce finalized, I embraced the clarity it brought. Sure, she walked away with the house, alimony, and child support, but she also walked away with lessons learned the hard way. The past could no longer define my present or my future. I understood that revenge isn't about destruction, it's about balance, consequence, and reclaiming personal power. And in that sense, the bonsai tree had done its job beautifully. Her attempts to gaslight me, to manipulate the narrative, had failed. Even her post-divorce calls, tinged with apology and regret, demonstrated she finally understood that her choices had repercussions she hadn't anticipated. I listened, acknowledged her words, but kept my distance. There was no space for weakness, no reason to erase the lessons she deserved to carry. My life, my boundaries, and my dignity had become my priorities, and nothing she said or did could undo that. The entire ordeal crystallized my understanding of trust, loyalty, and the fragility of relationships. 11 years of marriage can vanish in moments when fundamental principles are violated. Cheating, dishonesty, and risking the health of a partner are breaches that cannot be ignored. They leave indelible marks, and no apology or explanation can erase them entirely. I learned to respect my own boundaries and to recognize that self-preservation sometimes requires decisiveness and measured responses. Looking back, I also realized the subtle power of symbolism. The bonsai tree, a decade-long labor of love, disappeared without fanfare or unnecessary spectacle. Yet its absence was felt, acknowledged, and internalized by her. It sent a clear message without violence, without overt malice, but with unmistakable impact. It was the kind of quiet retribution that speaks louder than anger ever could. And it reminded me, and anyone paying attention, that sometimes lessons are more meaningful when they are understated, personal, and deeply connected to what was lost. Life continued, and I maintained my focus on stability, health, and the well-being of my children. Even the smallest acts of planning, self-care, and vigilance carried weight. They ensured that the past would not dictate the present. I stayed present in my children's lives, providing support, love, and guidance. I didn't let bitterness dominate, I let clarity and purpose guide me. The ordeal became a testament to resilience rather than revenge alone. There were moments of reflection, moments when I asked myself if I had gone too far. But each time, I returned to the reality of betrayal, the lies, the gaslighting, the STD, the blatant disregard for mutual respect. My actions weren't just reactionary, they were deliberate, purposeful, and grounded in accountability. They reminded her that choices have consequences, that trust cannot be broken without repercussion, and that even subtle actions carry weight. As the weeks turned into months, I embraced the freedom that clarity brought. The past no longer held power over my emotions. I had regained control over my life, my children's environment, and my own sense of dignity. The bonsai tree remained a quiet symbol of justice served, a tangible reminder that sometimes, the simplest acts carry the deepest meaning. She had cheated, denied, and gaslit, but ultimately, she could not erase the consequences. That realization, simple yet profound, became a foundation for moving forward. It allowed me to engage fully with life again, trusting cautiously, loving intentionally, and protecting myself and my children from future harm. Lessons learned the hard way often leave the deepest marks, and this one had left an imprint on everyone involved. Even now, I sometimes think about her calls, her apologies, and the quiet acknowledgement of mistakes she never fully admitted in words but fully understood in consequence. That understanding, paired with the physical absence of her bonsai tree, is a daily reminder: decisions matter. and integrity cannot be replaced by excuses. My life continues with focus, purpose, and resilience, shaped by the clarity that comes from confronting betrayal head-on. Ultimately, the story isn't about anger or revenge, it's about accountability, learning, and moving forward. She made choices that affected everyone involved, and while I didn't have control over her actions, I had full control over my response. That response, deliberate and measured, allowed me to regain agency, protect my family, and ensure the lesson was learned. So here's the takeaway: never underestimate the consequences of betrayal. Sometimes, the quiet, calculated actions have the most impact. Sometimes, a small act, like the disappearance of a bonsai tree, can carry a lifetime of lessons. And sometimes, you realize that moving forward, protecting what matters, and living intentionally is the ultimate form of justice. She may have thought she could cheat, gaslight, and walk away unscathed, but the truth was clear: she lost more than just a relationship. She lost trust, respect, and the quiet acknowledgement that her actions carry weight. And for me, that clarity, that restored sense of control, and the lessons learned were worth more than anything else. So, if you're out there, trusting someone, building a life together, and wondering about the fragility of fidelity, remember this story. Life doesn't always hand you closure, sometimes you create it. And when you do, it can be quiet, calculated, and immensely powerful. Thank you for following this journey with me. Remember, trust wisely, love carefully, and protect your heart. Life is short, and lessons are inevitable. Be intentional in your choices and deliberate in your responses.